Imagine this. You're living your life, following the plan you've laid out for yourself when suddenly everything falls apart. The things that felt secure slip through your fingers, certainties turn into doubts, and you find yourself asking, why is this happening to me? Where is God in the midst of this chaos? If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. We all face moments when life seems to lose all meaning. And in those moments, a crucial decision stands before us. Do we sink into despair, or do we find strength by trusting in God? The truth is, trusting God when everything is going well is easy, but the true test of faith comes when the ground disappears beneath our feet. Have you ever heard the story of a climber scaling a mountain at night? Unable to see anything around him, he clung to the rope with all his strength, fearing the worst. When he finally cried out to God for help, he heard a response: "Let go of the rope." He hesitated, trapped by the fear of falling, not realizing he was just a few feet from the ground. Sometimes, trusting God is exactly like that, letting go of the rope. It means surrendering control and believing that He knows exactly where we are and where we're going, even when everything feels uncertain. Today, we're going to explore together how to find strength when life seems meaningless. We'll look at examples from the Bible that teach us to trust God in the darkest moments, to recognize that His ways are higher than ours, and to discover how He transforms our pain into purpose. My invitation to you is simple. Join me in this inspiring message, because even though we can't control everything that happens around us, we can choose whom we trust with our lives. And when we trust in God, even the things that seem meaningless take on purpose. But first, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. In the coming videos, I'll bring you more content like this, content that will encourage you to reflect, grow closer to God, and find the best path for your life with Him. Let's get started. Now picture this. You're walking with someone you deeply respect. This person is a leader, a teacher, a friend you admire with all your heart. Suddenly they kneel before you, take a bowl of water, and begin washing your feet. You step back, startled, unable to comprehend. What are you doing? This doesn't make sense. That's exactly how Peter felt during the Last Supper. There was Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, doing something that seemed completely out of place. Peter, indignant, protested, "No, Lord, you will never wash my feet." John 13:8. But Jesus' response is so powerful that it still resonates with us today. "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." John 13:7. That phrase speaks directly to our hearts. How many times do we find ourselves in situations that make no sense? Maybe you're facing something like that right now. A door that closed without explanation, an unexpected loss, a difficulty that feels endless. In those moments, we're like Peter, confused, frustrated, searching for answers that don't seem to come. But here's the lesson. Jesus didn't ask Peter to understand. He asked him to trust. And that's exactly what God is asking of us today. To trust when everything seems out of place. To trust when our prayers aren't answered the way we hoped. To trust when life takes us down paths we never would have chosen. Look at Peter. In that moment, he didn't realize it. But that simple act of washing his feet was a lesson in humility, love, and service that would prepare him for the role he'd play in the future. Peter, the impulsive one, the doubter, became one of the strongest leaders of the early church. He eventually understood, but it happened in God's time, not his. Doesn't that make you reflect? How many times is God doing something in your life that you simply don't understand right now? Proverbs 3:5-6 gives us essential advice. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. God doesn't need our approval to act. He doesn't need to explain every detail of His plan. He sees the bigger picture, while we see only a small part. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." I'd love to hear your story. Share in the comments an experience of your own or of someone close to you where God's promises came to life. Let's strengthen our faith together and inspire others with these moments of hope and transformation. Perhaps you're holding on to something you don't understand, just like Peter tried to resist. Maybe it's fear, frustration, or even doubt. But the same Jesus who knelt to wash the disciples' feet is here today, ready to work in your life in ways you can't yet comprehend. He not only knows your future, but is shaping you right now for something greater. When Jesus washed Peter's feet, he wasn't simply cleaning off dirt. He was teaching an eternal lesson. True trust doesn't require understanding, it only requires faith. So here's a question for you. Are you willing to trust God, even when you don't understand? Are you ready to surrender your fears, your plans, and even your doubts to Him? Because when you let go of control and allow God to act, He turns what seemed like confusion into clarity and what appeared as chaos into purpose. Remember this, God doesn't need you to understand. He needs you to trust. Like Peter, one day you'll look back and see how every difficult moment was part of something extraordinary. Trusting God when life is clear and comfortable is something most of us do without much difficulty. But what happens when life becomes uncertain, confusing, or even painful? That's where the theology of trusting God comes to life. It's not just a theoretical concept. It's a practice of faith that challenges our limits and reshapes our relationship with the Creator. The Bible is filled with teachings that invite us to trust God, even when we can't see the way ahead. Proverbs 3:5-6 offers a foundational truth. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. This verse isn't just a reminder to let God guide our steps. It's a call to let go of our need to control everything. Our human tendency is to rely on what we understand, on what makes sense to us. But God calls us to something greater. He invites us to recognize that His ways are infinitely higher than ours. Look at what Isaiah 55:8-9 says. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways and my thoughts than your thoughts. Think about it. God doesn't just see the present moment, He sees eternity. He knows the beginning, the middle, and the end of your story. While you're focused on what's right in front of you, God is working on something much greater, far beyond what you could imagine. Hey, I've noticed you haven't clicked like yet. This is super important for YouTube to keep sharing this content and for us to continue helping you. Hit that like button now. It's free and makes a huge difference. Let's dive deeper with a practical example. Imagine you're on a plane and the pilot announces there will be turbulence. You can't see what the pilot sees. You don't have the flight map or the knowledge to navigate the aircraft. All you can do is trust that the pilot knows what they're doing. Now multiply that by God's infinite wisdom and power. He doesn't just see what's ahead, He controls it all. Maybe you're asking, why does God allow me to go through these difficulties? Why doesn't He make everything easier? The answer is found in Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This doesn't mean everything in life will be pleasant or easy. It means that God is transforming even the hardest moments into something that serves a greater purpose. Even when we don't understand, we can trust that He is working for our good. The theology of trusting God also teaches us that obedience doesn't depend on understanding. Look at Abraham's example. God called him to leave his land, his family, and everything familiar to go to a place He would show him. Genesis 12:1. Abraham wasn't given a detailed map or a clear picture of the future, but he trusted, he obeyed. And just like Abraham, God is calling you to trust Him without needing all the answers, because He sees the full picture, and His plans for you are always for something greater than you can imagine. Are you ready to take that step of faith? And what about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? In His humanity, He asked the Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. But then He completely surrendered to God's will. Not as I will, but as you will. Matthew 26:39. That is the ultimate level of trust, surrendering our desires, our control, and saying, God, let your will be done. When we talk about trusting God, we must also acknowledge that trust doesn't mean the absence of doubts or fears. Think of the psalmists. The book of Psalms is filled with cries, doubts, and even anger directed at God. And here's the beautiful part. God welcomes all of it. He doesn't demand perfect, flawless faith. He wants our hearts, our honesty. Trusting God is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's something we learn and practice as we walk with Him. Like a muscle that grows stronger with use, our faith develops as we choose day by day to trust God even when we don't understand His ways. Hey, I've noticed you haven't clicked like yet. It's super important for YouTube to keep sharing this content and for us to continue helping you. Hit that like button now. It's free and makes a big difference. The central point of the theology of trust is this: God is faithful. His faithfulness is the foundation on which we can build our lives, even in the most challenging moments. Lamentations 3:22-23 reminds us, "Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." So how do we live out this trust in practice? First, recognize that you don't need all the answers. Humility in admitting we don't know everything creates space for God to act. Second, remember God's promises. They are a refuge in moments of doubt. And third, practice gratitude. Even in the midst of difficulty, find reasons to give thanks. Gratitude transforms our perspective and helps us see God's hand, even in the smallest things. Trusting God doesn't eliminate life's challenges, but it gives us the strength to face them. When we put our faith in Him, we discover we are not alone. He is with us, guiding us, sustaining us, and working through every detail for our good. When life feels meaningless, what do you do? Do you retreat into doubt, try to figure it all out on your own, or choose to trust God? You might think, that sounds nice, but how do I actually trust God in the middle of chaos? The truth is, trusting God isn't automatic. It's a choice, a daily practice that transforms the way we live. Let's start with a powerful principle. Trust doesn't depend on having answers. It depends on a relationship. Imagine trusting a close friend. You don't need them to explain every detail of their decisions because you know their heart. In the same way, when we know God's character, we can rest even when we don't understand what He's doing. That's why the first step is this: spend time getting to know God deeply. This starts with prayer, and it doesn't need to be perfect or filled with fancy words. Be honest. Talk to God as you would a friend. God, I don't understand what's happening, but I want to trust you. Help me see beyond what I can see. Also, immerse yourself in His Word. The Bible is full of promises that remind us who God is and how He works. When you read Isaiah 55:8-9, where God says that His thoughts and ways are higher than ours, it's not just a statement. It's an invitation to trust Him even when everything seems confusing. Hit that like button and strengthen this message. It makes a huge difference for the channel and helps us reach more people, bringing faith and encouragement to trust in God's promises. Your support is essential. Now let's move on to the next step. Obey, even without understanding. This is the most challenging part. Our minds crave logic, explanations, and guarantees, but God calls us to take steps of faith even when we can't see the full path. Think of Abraham, who left everything behind to follow God's call without even knowing where he was going. Perhaps God is asking something of you right now. It could be forgiving someone who has hurt you, making a change in your life, or letting go of something you hold dear. You don't need to fully understand it. Just take the next step, trusting that God is in control. A practical example of this is surrendering your daily worries to God. When you feel anxious or stressed, pause and say, "Lord, I give this to you. Take care of it because I trust in you." It may seem simple, but it's transformative. Another essential aspect is learning to wait on God's timing. Waiting is something most of us dislike. We want quick answers, immediate solutions, but God uses waiting to shape us and prepare us. Think of Joseph, who spent years in prison before becoming governor of Egypt. During all that time, God was working behind the scenes. While you wait, remember this: God is never late. He's building something far greater than you can imagine. Use this time to grow spiritually. Pray, study the Word, and find ways to serve others. Waiting isn't passive. It's an active process of trusting that God is at work. A powerful exercise during times of waiting is practicing gratitude. Even in the hardest moments, there's always something to be thankful for. When you focus on your blessings, no matter how small, your perspective shifts. Try it. Take a piece of paper and write down 3 things you're grateful for today. It could be as simple as your health, a friend, or the gift of life itself. Gratitude opens our eyes to see God's hand in the midst of challenges. Another vital practice is not walking through life alone. God created us to live in community. When you share your struggles with other Christians, you find strength and encouragement. Join a prayer group or Bible study. Surround yourself with people who are also seeking to trust in God. Hearing others' testimonies can renew your faith and remind you that you're not walking this path alone. For example, if you're facing an illness, talk to someone who has been through a similar experience and found strength in God. These stories are powerful because they show us that if God was faithful to them, He will be faithful to you too. Now here's something essential. Stop trying to control everything. I know it's hard, but the more we hold on, the more exhausted we become. Letting go of control isn't giving up. It's acknowledging that God can handle the situation far better than we can. Imagine holding something heavy. The longer you hold on to it, the more tired you feel. But when you give it to God, you realize He is strong enough to carry it for you. Finally, embrace the mystery. Trusting God doesn't mean having all the answers. In fact, it means finding peace, even when you don't understand. Like an unfinished puzzle, our lives can sometimes feel fragmented, but God already sees the completed picture, and one day when you look back, it will all make sense. So, how can you start applying this today? Begin with something small. Say a simple prayer. Express gratitude for your blessings and surrender one specific worry to God. Say, God, this is hard for me, but I trust that you are in control. The practice of trusting God is transformative. It doesn't remove the challenges, but it changes how you face them. God never promised a life without storms, but He did promise to be with us in every one of them. And when you choose to trust Him, even when life seems to lose its meaning, you'll discover a peace and strength that only He can provide. Let's be honest, trusting God isn't always easy, especially when life pushes us to our limits, when questions pile up and answers seem out of reach. There are moments when all we can say is, "Why, God, why is this happening to me?" If you've ever felt that way, you need to know this. You're not alone. Doubt and pain are part of every Christian's journey. Even Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, cried out, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 26:39. That moment of vulnerability reminds us that even Jesus experienced the tension between human desires and submission to divine will. He didn't ignore his pain, He brought it to the Father. This gives us permission to do the same. Maybe you're facing a loss that feels unbearable. Maybe your prayers seem to go unanswered, or perhaps you're carrying a wound that no one else can see. God sees it, God knows it, and God cares deeply. Psalm 34:18 tells us, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Isn't it comforting to know that you can bring your pain to God just as it is? You don't have to hide it or pretend everything is okay. The book of Psalms is filled with honest cries like in Psalm 13:1, "How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever?" God not only allows these questions, He welcomes our laments. He is near, and He is faithful. In your waiting, in your pain, and in your trust, He is shaping you into something extraordinary. Here's something powerful. While God allows us to question, He also invites us to trust, not because our doubts disappear, but because His presence is greater than them. Think about Job. He lost everything, his possessions, his health, his family. He felt abandoned, yet he declared, "I know that my Redeemer lives." Job 19:25. This is the beauty of trusting in God. He doesn't demand that we understand everything. He calls us to rest in His character, even when our circumstances don't make sense. And here's something you might need to hear today. There's no shame in feeling pain. There's no shame in struggling to trust. Faith is not the absence of fear or doubt. It's choosing to move forward, even when you're trembling. Remember this, pain is not the end of your story. God promises that there is purpose in everything we face, even if we can't see it now. Romans 8:18 encourages us, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." Sometimes the greatest act of faith is simply to keep going, to keep praying, even when it feels like God is silent, to keep believing that He is good, even when life doesn't feel good, to keep surrendering your pain, knowing that He alone can transform it. And don't forget, God is working even now. Isaiah 61:3 tells us that He gives a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. This doesn't mean the pain disappears instantly, but it does mean that God can take even the most broken pieces of our lives and turn them into something beautiful. So what do you do when you can't see the way? You trust that God is holding your hand, even in the darkness. You believe that even when you don't feel it, He is present. And you remember that while the tears may last through the night, Joy comes in the morning, Psalm 35. Allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to question. But above all, allow yourself to trust. Because God doesn't just see your pain, He shares it. He walks with you, holds you up, and promises that one day He will wipe every tear from your eyes. Revelation 21:4. That is the God you can trust. Life can be hard. Sometimes circumstances feel overwhelming. Answers seem distant and the pain feels unbearable. But here's the truth. Your story isn't over. God isn't finished with you. And even in the moments when everything feels lost, there is hope. This hope isn't empty optimism or positive thinking. It's a firm and secure anchor rooted in God's promises. Hebrews 6:19 says, "We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure." And do you know why? Because this hope doesn't depend on our circumstances. It depends on the character of God. Think about it. The same God who placed the stars in the sky knows your name. He sees every tear you cry. He understands every doubt you carry. And He is by your side even when you can't feel Him. Psalm 139:16 reminds us that God saw all our days before even one of them came to be. This means He doesn't just know where you are. He knows where you're going. The Bible promises that for those who love God, all things work together for good. Romans 8:28. You might think, but how can that be true? How can anything good come from this situation? That's a valid question. Sometimes it's impossible to see the good in the moment, but God doesn't just work in the present, He works in eternity. Picture a weaver creating a masterpiece. From one side, all you see are tangled, chaotic threads. It looks like a meaningless mess. But from the other side, the weaver is crafting something beautiful. That's how it is with God. What seems confusing and painful to us is, in reality, part of something much greater that He is weaving. Isaiah 61:3 gives us an incredible promise. God gives us a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. This doesn't mean our difficulties disappear instantly, but it does mean that God transforms pain into purpose and sorrow into joy. Even when you can't see it, trust that He is working. One day, when you look back, you'll see how He turned even the hardest moments into something extraordinary. Look, God does not ignore your suffering. He doesn't minimize your pain, but He promises that one day it will all make sense. Revelation 21:4 gives us a glimpse of what's to come. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Can you imagine that? One day, every pain will be replaced with joy. Every loss will be restored. Every broken heart will be healed. This is more than just hope. It's a promise. In the meantime, God gives us strength to keep going. He sustains us, guides us, and helps us see that even in the midst of suffering, He is with us. Psalm 23:4 reminds us, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for You are with me." So, what does this mean for you today? It means that no matter how hard your situation may be, God is still in control. It means you can trust that He is working, even when you don't see immediate results. And it means you can rest in the assurance that one day, everything will be renewed. You might be thinking, what if I fail? What if my faith isn't strong enough? Let me remind you of something. Your hope doesn't depend on you. It depends on God. He is faithful, even when we are weak. 2 Timothy 2:13 reassures us, if we are faithless, He remains faithful, for He cannot disown Himself. So rise up, keep walking, keep believing, because God is with you, and He will never abandon you. Your pain has a purpose, your life has meaning, and your story is in the hands of the one who can do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. Ephesians 3:20. Trust, wait, keep your eyes fixed on Him, because the best is yet to come. Sometimes life leaves us speechless. Challenges pile up, questions go unanswered, and it feels like we're trapped in an endless dark night. But here's something I want you to hold in your heart. God never loses control. He never abandons His children. And even though it may seem impossible right now, what you're facing today can be transformed into something beautiful and meaningful by the one who makes all things new. Are you tired? God is carrying you in His arms. Isaiah 40:31 offers us a powerful promise. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Hoping in God isn't passive waiting. It's active trust, knowing He is renewing you as you move forward. You may not feel it, but even now, in the silence and in the pain, God is holding you. Imagine a small child learning to walk, falling again and again. Their father is always there, ready to pick them up, guide them, and encourage them to try again. That's how God is with you. He isn't distant, watching from afar. He's right beside you, ready to lift you up and give you the strength to keep going. And you know what else? Your story isn't over. God is an expert in rewriting stories. What feels like defeat today could be the beginning of a powerful testimony. Look at Joseph's story. Sold into slavery, falsely imprisoned, he could have lost hope. But he trusted God, and at the right time, he wasn't just freed, he was placed in a position of influence to save countless lives. What seemed like a tragic end became a glorious beginning. Maybe today you're staring at the broken pieces of something in your life. I want you to know that God doesn't just gather those pieces, He transforms them into something new, something beautiful. He doesn't discard what's been hurt or lost. He uses it, He restores it, He redeems it. You may not see it now, but God is at work. Think of a farmer planting a seed. He doesn't see results on the same day. In fact, for weeks, maybe months, all he sees is soil. But beneath the surface, life is growing. That's how it is with God. Even when it seems like nothing is happening, He is working behind the scenes. Remember what's written in Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. This promise doesn't mean we won't face difficulties, but it assures us that even in them, God is leading us towards something greater. Here's a truth I want you to hold on to. You are not alone. One of the greatest lies we believe is that no one understands what we're going through. But God understands, Jesus understands. He experienced betrayal, abandonment, physical suffering, and emotional pain. He knows your pain deeply and personally. And He is with you right now saying, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Hebrews 13:5. When we face the darkest moments in life, we have two options, to pull away from God or to draw closer to Him. I want to encourage you to choose to draw closer. Even when you can't feel Him, He is there. Even when you don't understand, He is in control. While you wait and trust, there's something you can do. Praise. It might feel strange to praise in the midst of pain, but praise is an act of faith. It declares, God, I don't understand, but I thank you. I trust that you are good and that you are working in my life. Praise shifts our perspective, taking the focus off our problems and placing it on God, the only one who can resolve them. Now, picture this. Imagine holding a stone in your hands. That stone represents the weight you're carrying, your worries, fears, and pain. Now, imagine handing that stone over to God. Isn't that freeing? You weren't created to carry it alone. God says to you, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. That rest is for you. No matter how big or small the burden, God is ready to carry it. All He asks is that you trust Him. And here's the most incredible part. God doesn't just help you carry the burden, He transforms your pain into victory. He does it so His glory can be revealed and so you can share His faithfulness with others. Think about the people around you. How many need to hear that there's hope, that God is real and that He transforms lives? Your story could be the answer someone is looking for. So don't give up. No matter how hard it seems right now, God is writing something in your life. And when you reach the other side, when you look back, you'll see that He was with you every step of the way. So rise up, trust, praise, and remember, the best is yet to come. Not because life will always be easy, but because God is always faithful. He has promised that one day He will wipe every tear, restore every loss, and make all things new. Revelation 21:4. Believe this. There is hope for you. There is strength for you. There is a bright future ahead of you. Keep moving forward. God is by your side, and He never fails. If there's one thing you take away from everything we've shared today, let it be this. God is trustworthy, even when life doesn't make sense. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He sees you, He knows you, and He has a purpose for every moment of your life, even the hardest ones. Maybe you're facing a storm right now. Maybe the pain feels unbearable, or the path is so dark you don't know how to take the next step. But I want you to know this: God isn't just with you, He's working in you and through you. Every tear you've cried, every prayer you've uttered is in the hands of a God who turns chaos into purpose and pain into beauty. Think about this. When Jesus faced the cross, He looked beyond the pain of the moment. Hebrews 12:2 says that He endured the cross for the joy set before Him. He knew that His obedience would glorify the Father and open the way for our redemption. In the same way, you can trust that your faithfulness, even in the storms, is building something eternal. So what do you do now? The first step is to surrender. Hand over your fears, doubts, and struggles to God. Say, Lord, I don't understand what's happening, but I trust you. I place it all in your hands. That simple prayer can completely change how you face your circumstances. The next step is to act. Choose to take a step of faith today, no matter how small it may seem. Maybe it's praying sincerely for the first time in weeks. Maybe it's forgiving someone. Or maybe it's simply deciding not to give up, because you know God is with you. Finally, share this message of hope and be a light for others who are also facing challenges. Your testimony might be exactly what someone needs to find hope. Remember, trusting God doesn't remove life's challenges, but it changes the way you face them. And when you trust in Him, you'll find that you are being upheld by hands that never fail. So rise up, trust, obey, and keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith. He began a good work in you, and He will be faithful to complete it. Philippians 1:6. The best is yet to come. Trust in Him, because He never fails. Thank you for making it this far. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue receiving more content like this. Now, the end screens are appearing, where you'll find other videos just as meaningful as this one. Click and keep watching to understand how deeply God loves you and how great His love is for you.